The next speaker here on this round table is Bartosz Bekier. The guy did 1,500 kilometers, yeah, from Warsaw to be here.
Ah bon, il vient directement de...
Oui.
Ah bon?
Da.
Wow.
Da. And so, I met Bartosz, I think, in the Duma first time, yes?
Yeah.
With Zhirinovsky in the Duma. Was a conference of LDPR with the right people. I was there with the Japanese, you know, the Japanese, they were Japanese right wing, that is, it's hardcore, eh? So, and then the British guys, and who else, yeah? And then I discovered him as a nice Polish guy. So, and I'm very proud that you're here. So, please speak.
I'm very proud to be here. Hello everyone. I'm always very happy. I'm very happy to visit Belgium every time I'm here. So I'm happy right now.
Is it the first time?
No, I was here last time in July when Kris invited me for the first time here to his dacha. But before that I was traveling here for tourism. I travel a lot, and yesterday I was, for example, in Germany, staying in little town of Alfeld. And what I can say that when I'm traveling, I'm also observing things and some phenomena, observing people. And the thing that I've observed is that the sanctions are working, but they are working not like hitting Russia in the first place, but they are hitting us, Europe. Because I saw many shops, many restaurants that are closed, probably hit for the first time during the COVID. And now they're striked again because of the sanctions. And to be honest, I don't know if this whole sanction business has any profits for Europe. I think it harms our societies, harms our economy, and you can see it with your own eyes. So if you go to the streets of, for example, Germany, this little town was almost dead, but it's so beautiful, and there were no tourists at all. And many locals, many pubs were just closed without a date of opening. So it was sometimes it was a sad thing, but anyway, traveling is fun, and I like to travel a lot and visit my friends in many places in Europe. And for example, Kris in Belgium. Kris, thank you again for the invitation and occasion to share some thoughts, because we're here to share some thoughts. We can agree, we can disagree, but the discussion is a good thing, and I think that we in Europe we need discussion, because things are going in the wrong way. You may be shocked because I'm from Poland and I'm not speaking like the whole mainstream, like because when you in Poland you are a political activist, politician, or a journalist. Most of the politicians in Poland and journalists are extremely pro-American, extremely pro-NATO. They're not listening to any critique. And I remember that even when I was a student, I was always very critical towards Western propaganda. Which brought me to Syria in 2013, where I come to see with my own eyes how the colored revolution in Damascus is changing into a proxy civil war and tearing down the country, a very bloody war, very dirty. And it was horrible to observe, but it was a very important experience for me to see how American influence and American policy in the Middle East works in practice. And it was my first experience. The second one, which was also very important, was observing the Maidan, of independence, Euromaidan so-called, from 2013 and 2014 in Kiev, when I saw in my own eyes that political class, which opposed Yanukovych, was using as a tool neo-Nazis from Prawy Sektor, from the Svoboda party, and the emblems of Bandera, the Banderate flags were just all over the crowds there. And of course, there was no word about it in Polish media that that Ukrainian nationalism is on the rise in Kiev, because it was still controversial back then to see people hanging banners, having banners with representing ideology that murdered something around 200,000 Poles in the eastern parts of former Poland. So this was a shock again, and next I was observing the conflict that another colored revolution has turned into a civil war in Ukraine. And I went to Donbass. I was in Donetsk when the Ukrainians started the so-called anti-terrorist operation, and I've seen that I've seen many times that Ukrainians were just shooting on civilian areas in Donetsk, killing innocent people just like that. As you said before, you always seen this. In 2016, I was there in 2014 when the whole operation began. And so, what can I say? Back then, in 2013, I was not even imagining that war can happen somewhere so near my home. And when I was observing war in Syria, it was a total abstraction. It was very hard to imagine that something very similar to this can happen so close from my home. And as I think you already heard a few weeks ago, first bomb because of the Ukrainian-Russian war fell in Poland. By the way, it was in the Lublin region, which is my family region. I live in Warsaw, but lots of my big part of my family still lives in Lubelszczyzna region, and it was a long way from 2013 to 2022, but here we are. And I think that it is important to say that this Ukrainian missile, because as we now know, it was a part of Ukrainian system S-100, S-300. Of course, it was produced in former Soviet Union, but now Ukrainians are using it. It killed 2 innocent people. But what is important to say that in the first hours after the missile hit Poland, Polish government went total mute. There was no comment for many hours, and the first politician which addressed Poles after the attack was President Zelensky. In his speech directly to Poles, he said that this was a Russian missile and it's time to react for NATO. And of course, many Ukrainian trolls on the internet were writing that it's time to activate Article 5 of NATO and start a full-scale war with Russia for Ukraine. And I think it's very important to underline the fact that inside Europe, there are many forces that would like to push us to direct war. And of course, it's Zelensky, it's Ukraine, which is now sometimes acting like a terrorist state. You've mentioned before assassinations of Daria Dugina. She was also my friend. As we know, all leads go to Ukraine, and I think we can say with 100% that it was the Ukrainians that killed her. So which state is making such things? Only terrorist states like Ukraine or Israel, for example. Many states are using this kind of tools, but they are, for most of the people know, there are terrorist states or states that are a threat to global peace. And I think that now one of the main governments which is a threat to us all is Ukrainian government, because openly lying about this rocket was calculated to bring us to open war with Russia. Of course, as Kris said before, You can say that in some ways NATO is already in war with Russia in Ukraine, but not direct war. For example, Poland is sending, I think, after the Americans and maybe British, but maybe even before British, Poland is one of the main countries which is sending their, I mean everything. They're sending their not only weapons, and by weapons I don't mean only personal equipment, but of course they are sending personal equipment, but also Poland already sent their hundreds of T-72 tanks, hundreds of PT-91 tanks, hundreds of artillery system Crab, tons of fuels, electricity, coal, everything. I mean everything, and
soldiers.
And there are some voluntary people who are going there fights. Of course, it's also true. It's unofficial, and they are not soldiers, but of course they are there. It's a fact, and it is important to see this because Ukraine's interest is taking all Europe to full-scale war. Of course, we are already supporting them, as I said, and Ukraine wouldn't last a few days without this help. And by the way, President Zelensky, advisor Arestowicz said that without equipment from Poland, Ukraine wouldn't last 3 days. The advisor of President Zelensky says something like that, so it shows that this is a big proxy war conflict, not only a war between Ukraine and NATO. But what is very important that our young people are not dying there, only volunteers, but there are no soldiers and people who don't want war fighting their war. And Ukraine and many forces in Europe want to change it. And we must use every occasion to say the truth, and to point the finger and say these are warmongers, and they have to be isolated, and everyone should know these people are not working for our societies, they are working for Zelensky, they are working for, as you said, American deep state, but they are very dangerous people. And everywhere there should be lists of people who are warmongering in every local country, people which want to see our young people, in a conflict directly in Ukraine, dying for Zelensky. I'm not discussing, the reasons for the war. It's a big discussion. I'm not analyzing it now, but the facts are like this. We must say every time someone is speaking about Article 5 and that kind of stuff, we must say this guy is a possible trouble. This guy is a danger. He must be isolated. And of course, it's a one thing. It's kind of existential thing. But there is also another thing. It's the beginning of winter. The sanctions are working, as I said, but they are working against us, and it is an open question, I think. How longer can we last without any massive protests? We have some protests, of course, not in Poland, which is totally overwhelmed by pro-war propaganda, but we've seen protests in countries such like Czech Republic. I think you've heard about 100,000 people gathering in Prague. The action was made twice. In Poland, I don't know how the situation in Belgium, but in Poland it would be hard to gather more than, 1,000 people protesting against the sanctions. This is the scale of the propaganda. But for some reasons, Czechs are partly immune to this, and I think it is good to observe Czech Republic and is it possible that the protest movement there is so strong, and here in the West or or for example in Central Europe, like in Germany or in Poland, it's very very weak. But the sanctions are like disastrous in the same scale, not only for Czech Republic, of course, but also for Poland and Germany. And that's the thing that I think we should observe and learn from the Czechs, how they did it. And for now, if you have any questions, I will answer. But these things I've said about the security, about staying away from war, and trying to pressure our governments to you know, make some more rational economy, is the things that I think are the most important points of my speech. And thank you if you have any questions. Very welcome.